coalition of the Willing Summit as the UK pledges more military support for Ukraine. And freed after 12 years in jail, US citizen Ksenia Karlina is finally home after a prisoner exchange between the US and Russia. To our top story, and Wall Street's main stock indexes are down today, bucking the trend across European and Asian markets who've had better days in the market. The Dow Jones dropped 1.6% upon opening, whilst the S&P 500 lost 2.3%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 was down nearly 3%. It comes as US inflation fell more than expected in March, easing to 2.4%. Earlier today, President Trump posted his delight at the inflation news. We can now join Hunter S. Gayler, Republican strategist and president and co-founder of Spencer Pruitt. A pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. So, Donald Trump's tariffs, are they the work of a mastermind or of a maverick?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a maverick or a mastermind. I think what we're seeing is an America First policy. I think it's the Trump trade reset. I don't think we're witnessing a retreat. I think we're witnessing a recalibration. And I think by President Trump pausing tariffs globally is not a sign of weakness, but it's a very strategic move to isolate, in this particular case, Beijing, and stabilize our global partners.
So, Hunter, as I said earlier, the US markets are down while indexes across Asia and Europe rallied. Are investors spooked over the mixed messages and the uncertainty coming out of the White House?
I don't think so because, at the end of the day, free trade without fairness is a surrender in slow motion. I think what investors are seeing is there's going to be consequences for cheaters, and I think we're redefining fair trade. So I think there is an adaptation that's happening, not resisting. I think smart investors are being able to follow the market, up massively yesterday, down today. This is a retaliation. It signals panic, not power for China. But their economy is far more export reliant than ours. So what Trump is doing with this 10% universal levy, it's the new normal for reciprocity, and I think that's important. And very smart, shrewd investors are seeing that, and they're planning long-term, not short-term.
Cheaters, who do you mean by cheaters? Is that China that you're referring to, or which other countries would you include in that name?
I would mainly say China right now. I mean, what you're seeing is the U.S. drawing the line, right? And the world will see consistency, and that's when market flows. By keeping China under a 125% tariff regime while pausing global levies, Trump is sending a two-part message. One, allies are welcome, but China's economic warfare ends here, and that's the line in the sand. So when I say we're redefining free trade and there's consequences for cheaters, China is at the top of that list. Why? We saw Kevin O'Leary talk about it the other day on CNN, where he said, look, China doesn't play by the rules. They've been a part of this global economics. They steal IP. They're beating out us in manufacturing. They're the closest economic competitor we have. But remember, America is still the largest economy in the world, and we're one of the largest consuming economies in the world. And that's a bad news for China. So they either play by the rules and be fair and stop taking advantage of really our economic system. They're smart, but they've been cheating. We can't sue them. We own businesses that operate all around the world. I can't go after China in their court system. So they need to play by the global the global position that if they're going to play in America, they need to play by the rules. So that's our standpoint on this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. China would obviously disagree with that in many senses, but you have called this a high-stakes game of economic poker. But China is just not blinking right now. They're standing as firm as the US is, saying we have no fear of a trade war against selfish Trump. But where really does this leave the world's biggest economies? At the moment, you said they are, so dominant. This is concerning because this will have ramifications for the rest of the globe.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to compete with China. Let's just call it for what it is. I mean, I'm an American first, individual, but I also, I always like to say I was born on a day. It just wasn't yesterday. It's very hard to compete with the manufacturing strength of China and the low cost of manufacturing and the low cost of labor. And so, as any entrepreneur, any smart entrepreneur knows or business person knows, if I can lower my cost of labor and I can increase my profit, then I'm going to go there. That's why you're seeing Vietnam, you're seeing Beijing, you're seeing Guangzhou, you're seeing all of these companies that massively, make and manufacture from the plastics to, I mean, look at the iPhone. I mean, it might have been designed in California, but it's manufactured in China. And so you're seeing all of these things that's going to, listen, America's gonna hurt for a little bit. Now, there's the people that really, I call it the Walmart shopper. That's of no disrespect to anyone, but it's the lower income individuals that shop at these places that are buying products largely made and manufactured in China. They're gonna feel a little bit of this hurting. But from a U.S. perspective, this is, in my opinion, strategic decoupling, not isolationism, right? So what the media calls a trade war is actually just a global reordering. So what I believe Trump is doing is forging a new economic map. Less reliance on our adversaries and more resilience with our partners. And I think that's what we're starting to see here.
And Amazon CEO, actually just picking up on a point that you said customers should start preparing to pay more due to Trump's tariffs. We know China is home to around half of Amazon's sellers and also manufacturers for things like Shein and Temu. You touched on it there, but Hunter, is America actually capable of producing these products right now at a low cost? Or are you prepared for Americans just to be paying more because you're not there in the industrial side of things?
Well, look, you're absolutely correct. I think the real question we have to ask ourselves is an internal question. Our population in the United States is a little over 350 million. Okay, China's 1.2 billion, India 1.2 billion, member of BRICS, right? And so until we actually increase our internal labor force, our internal manufacturing capabilities here, and actually get a generation that wants to work, that's kind of what we see as the problem. We don't have the manpower to be able to produce at these low costs like China does. It just doesn't. We just don't have the manpower, and that's because of a population. That's because of a population growth problem in the United States. Being that we're a $35 trillion plus market in the United States with consumption and more, quite frankly, China is getting close. But I think in the economic reality, everyday consumer items, yes, people need to be prepared to pay more. But when you look at core industries, okay, not just economics, but their national security pillars, keeping a 25% tariff ensures that domestic resilience in sectors critical to sovereignty, steel, aluminum, auto tariffs, they're going to be here to stay, and that's for a reason.
Hunter S. Gaylor, Republican strategist and president and co-founder of Spencer Pruitt. Thank you for your insights this evening. It's been very interesting to have you on the show.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
Now,